Good Thursday afternoon to you, 4 o'clock time for Sports4CLE. Thanks for joining us. Hope you're having a good day. Browns out in Berea on the practice field getting ready for Sunday's matchup at home against the Jacksonville Jaguars. And some news and notes from practice today. Amari Cooper not able to go. Concussion protocol. David Njoku rest in his knee. Second straight day he's missed practice. Dorian Thompson-Robinson was practicing but has not cleared the final hurdle of the concussion protocol. Through to the practice squad guys along with P.J. Walker during the part of practice that was open to the media. That from Browns beat reporter Scott Petrak. Let's welcome in Quincy Carrier, Untitled, Unfiltered Browns coverage. Quincy, Denzel Ward back in practicing. That's good news. Amari Cooper, if he is unable to go, that would be a concern, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, other guys are going to have to step up. I thought the wide receivers actually did a good job stepping up once Amari went down. I thought Elijah Moore's been having a good last few weeks here. I think that you've been having some guys step up outside of him. Cedric Tillman made a couple of plays the last few weeks. So, yes, you're going to have guys step up, but this seems like the right time to have guys step up because it seems like they're ready to take that step for them.
So NFL Network from Good Morning Football, former defensive back Jason McCourty was asked a backup quarterback who could have a magic finish to this season as a starter. Here's his answer.
I'm going to make my case for Joe Flacco with the Browns.
Okay.
I loved Jake Browning and that experience on Monday, but you look at the Bengals, they're in the 10th spot. Can he be able to pull them up through all those teams that are in front of him? For the Browns and their defense and where they already sit, Joe Flacco, he can come in and possibly do just enough. He has some good throws in that game early on against the Rams. Yes, you look at the score, and it seems that it was a worse game than what it actually was. They were in that game till the end, and the Rams got some scores late in that one. What we saw Flacco last year with the Jets, and now him being signed late, to me, that is true magic, where you're like, how the hell did this happen? I don't know where his hands were, how he pulled his hat out of the rabbit out of the hat, but somehow he was able to do it. So I'm making my case for old Joe Flacco.
Quincy, the Joe Flacco DTR debate, just your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're very similar quarterbacks at this point. Joe Flacco, he's going to struggle throwing the ball deep. We saw it, like the 3 deep balls he threw this year. They kind of floated on him, but he did really good in that intermediate stuff. We saw DTR have some success in that intermediate stuff. I think your chances to win don't really fluctuate greatly between those two quarterbacks. DTR gives you more of an element of running the ball with him. Like he can just break out, make a play with his legs if it becomes congested on a 3rd and 3, which is something that Joe Flacco can't do. But Joe Flacco is a veteran. He's going to probably make more consistent decisions with the football. So I think that balances out to relatively similar quarterback play from both guys, right? Like, I just don't think it matters as much who starts at quarterback for the Browns as long as it's DTR or Joe Flacco. I think those are fine options. It's a pretty good place to be at. The Browns, they're going to win or lose games for the rest of the season based on that defensive line. That's going to be the through point of it, right? Nobody on offense is carrying them to victory. It's going to be the defensive line. So that's just where I'm at with it.
Yeah, and I've said all week, the thing is the ball comes out of Joe Flacco's hands a little quicker. DTR gives you, like you said, the ability to threaten a defense with his legs. I'd have a package for both. I would use DTR. I would start Flacco. I'd use DTR just because I think he gives you an element of something else that the defense has to worry about.
The one thing you do have to worry about with Joe Flacco, because DTR and Joe Flacco actually get rid of the ball kind of similarly, like very quick. Both of them under 2.5 second time to throws. I think they're both really quick to get rid of the football. It's just how many throws does he have before it starts to matter that he's 38, right? Like, is this going to be a thing where he's much better at the beginning of the games than he is at the end of games? Is this going to be a thing where he's not somebody who plays well off back-to-back weeks? Like, the age thing is a factor with Joe Flacco, and we really have to see how that plays out. I anticipate that the first 2 games with Joe probably going to be the best that you can get out of him. We'll see what you get out of him after that. And he took a lot of hits in that game. The body just doesn't recover at 38 the same way it does at 25. And that's another thing that you have to monitor with Joe Flacco is He might be able to give you a vintage Joe Flacco performance every once in a while, but part of aging is that you can't reproduce those kind of performances on a weekly basis.
All right, truth about backup quarterbacks. I know you've addressed this in your show. Just backup quarterbacks.
I think people make too much of a deal of these backup quarterbacks. Like, I've seen people write these articles where they're like, hey, you need to invest $10, $12 million into your backup quarterback, because what if your starter goes down? The backup plan for your starting quarterback goes down is not your backup quarterback. It is the rest of your team, right? The Bengals' backup plan for Joe Burrow going down is Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. It has nothing to do with Jake Browning. Jake Browning is fine enough, but they signed Jake Browning off the street a couple of years ago. It wasn't this big investment that they made at backup quarterback. Look at the Browns. You can argue probably have had the worst backup quarterback play of any team that's had to rely on backup quarterback play, but yet they had the best record of any team that's had to rely on backup quarterback play, because their backup plan for quarterback was not their backup quarterback. It was everything else. It was Amari Cooper. It was trying to get a run game around it. It was this defense especially, right? Building a good team is what helped you survive a quarterback going down. If your team is built around your quarterback and your quarterback goes down and you can't make anything of these wide receivers or offensive linemen, a backup quarterback's not going to solve that, right? If you need your quarterback to be Superman in order for your offense to work, you ain't going to have Superman on the bench. You go, like, if you had Superman on the bench, he wouldn't be on the bench, right? So there's not enough starting quarterbacks for teams that need starters, let alone backups. So if you want to ensure yourself in case your quarterback goes down, ensure the rest of the roster. Spend that money on other positions, because if you decide that you're going to spend $15 million on a backup quarterback just in case your starter goes down, and your starter goes down and you don't have enough around that starter to begin with, and then you don't have enough around that backup quarterback to begin with, guess what? You're still going to stink.
Yeah.
So that's just the truth of football. Like, we make so much about that quarterback position when there's like 5 or 6 guys that are that important. Everybody else, it matters what's around them.
Okay, so this is for the boy Kevin Stefanski needs to run the football more crowd. This is from ESPN.com. Most rushing attempts this season. Browns are tied for first with the Baltimore Ravens with 390. Falcons are third, 386. Bears, 376. Eagles, 367. So as much as people want to say the Browns aren't running the football, nobody is running the football more than the Cleveland Browns. And remind me again, Quincy, what game did Nick Chubb go out in?
Week 2.
Okay.
First quarter, week 2.
They're running the football.
Yeah, we've done this for like 3 years. I feel like I've been on this show for 3 years. Every year we're like, hey, man, they run the football. Hey, man, they're top 5 in running the football. And then we still get these calls where like, they don't run it enough. They need to run it more. They need to be at the top of the league. They need to do this. They need to run it like they used to run Herschel Walker at Georgia. And it's just like, all right. Like, you know what I mean? I just don't know what will ever satisfy people. They're running the ball more than the Falcons have. And the Falcons have B. John Robinson. We don't got B. John. We still running this ball. I would actually question, why are we that high in rushing attempts? What about this rushing game has dictated to us that we need to be at the top of the league in rushing attempts? If there's ever a rushing attempt, then I'm like, hey, man, I'm okay with being outside the top 10 in rushing attempts. This is the year. I'd rather throw the ball to David Njoku 5 more times. Like, I think that is a better option than Jerome Ford. And also think about what we're doing here. We're advocating for the Browns to give the ball to the 5th best option on an offense that's already injured. When we're talking about run the ball. When it's Nick Chubb, it makes sense. He might be the best option on the field. David Njoku's a better option to get something going. Amari Cooper's a better option. Elijah Moore's a better option to get things going. A quarterback scrambling has been a better option for the Browns to get something going. And then there's Jerome Ford and the rest of the running backs. So, yeah, people have just lumped onto this run the ball take, and it just makes no sense. Like, they gonna get somebody in here that don't run the ball. Like, ask the Cincinnati Bengals if they run the ball, because they ran it 29 times last week. They ran it 8 times with Joe Mixon the week before, and had 2 people in rushing attempts, the quarterback and Joe Mixon. That's not running the football. The Browns don't do that.
All right. Again, what do you think could have been in 2023 for the Browns? Again, this is a topic I know you addressed on your show. I'm curious, what could have been in 2023?
I mean, when you look at the landscape right now, the Browns could be the 1 seed, right? If Nick Chubb and Deshaun Watson don't go out, and you can maybe make the argument that if you just don't have Nick Chubb go out, you might have a shot at the 1 seed. You might not be it, but I think if both are healthy, you are the 1 seed. You beat very good teams this year. You beat Cincinnati with Joe Burrow. Remember when people were discounting that because it wasn't perfect Joe Burrow. It was just Joe Burrow didn't look good versus us, so it didn't count, right? But we beat Cincinnati with Joe Burrow. We beat the San Francisco 49ers. We beat all of these teams. We beat the Ravens on the road. We know that this team has the possibility to do it. With Nick Chubb, you would have to imagine that would jump up more. This team would probably be the 1 seed or close to the 1 seed, and maybe even the class at the AFC if they didn't have the injuries, but that's the way the cookie crumbles, and the Browns have made a lot out of the way that this cookie has crumbled, which has been terrible for them on the offensive side especially.
Quincy Carrier from Untitled Unfiltered Browns Coverage and I. Going to step aside, take a quick timeout. Other side of the break, we'll head into the voicemail of Truth and Reason, talk a little bit about the Browns defense. Sports for CLE. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
Ooh, holiday gold! The $20 scratch-off?
It has 100 times multiplier. I could win $1 million.
Psych! I got merry and bright.
No fair.
It has a 200 times multiplier. I could win $2 million!
Game on the back.
Game on the back. Game on the back! Game on the back! Game on the back! Game on the back! Game.
We continue talking Browns with Quincy Carrier from Untitled Unfiltered Browns Coverage. Let's head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Hi, this is Jim from Rochester. Just calling because I heard some comments about none of this is our head coach's fault, and I just can't understand that. What is he, the Teflon coach? Nothing ever sticks to him? No fault ever is his? I don't understand what hold he has over you guys. It's not going to get any better. It's going to get worse. Another statement was that signs of a good head coach is to surround yourself with good coaches. And right now we've got the worst offensive coordinator in the league, him, and he won't hire a new one. So come on, guys. Have a good one.
As always, appreciate all the voicemails. Quincy, Jim is not a Kevin Stefanski fan, but as I've said before, let me ask you what you think the Chiefs' offense would be without Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce. What would the Bills be without Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs? What would the Dolphins be without Tua and Tyreek Hill? That's what Kevin Stefanski's been dealing with without Deshaun Watson and Nick Chubb. Take away the top 2 weapons, including the quarterback and his top weapon, and he's still 7-5.
He said a coach is only as good as the coordinators he hires around him, or something around those lines, right? Like he made the point that, okay, he should be evaluated based on the coordinators he hires.
We mentioned that relative to, he was a big fan of Jim Schwartz. I said, he hired Jim Schwartz.
Well, that's what I'm saying. You can't ignore that. Right? You can't ignore Jim Schwartz being hired. And what do you expect the offense to be? Like, what can the expectation be? The expectation is this. Honestly, the fact that you've gotten to 7 wins with this is crazy. Look at what Kyle Shanahan does, right? We all think that Kyle Shanahan, great offensive mind. He can make something out of nothing. We all can agree on that, right? I'm pretty sure Jim would agree on that. Well, look at what Kyle Shanahan's record was the 2 years where he had all of his offensive players go down. He won 4 games in 6 games.
Yeah. Well,
is my point any clearer? Right? Like, it is what it is. Like, you cannot coordinate your way out of injuries.
Yeah. And Kyle Shanahan struggled when Deebo Samuel and Christian McCaffrey were banged up against the Browns. It's how the Browns ended up beating them without Deshaun Watson.
Not just the Browns, the Minnesota Vikings and the Cincinnati Bengals. They lost 3 straight when those players were out.
Right. Again.
Yeah. Any coordinator, if you take away a coordinator's best players, which Christian McCaffrey and Deebo Samuels are the best players on that offense. I don't care what they try to tell you about Brock Purdy. Those are the two best players on that offense. You took them out. Ooh, looks like a different offense. Brock Purdy looks like a different quarterback. Wonder why. Like, we don't have to play silly with this. Like, it's right there in front of you. If you're wondering why the Browns offense isn't good, look at who's not on the field that was on the field in week 1. And that might give you a solid answer.
Well, and you're also playing with your 4th and 5th tackles. So that's a whole
we ain't got to that.
Yeah. So
we ain't got Coop.
There's a whole nother thing. If you take the amount of salary cap that is injured, the Browns have by far the most. And you do salary cap because that's an equitable distribution. Everybody has to have the same amount. The Browns have the most salary cap that is unavailable to them in the NFL by a wide margin. But I digress.
I believe the Browns have 6 starters
that
have played most of the season that you expected to play most of the season. It's like 3 offensive linemen, Amari Cooper, David Njoku, Elijah Moore, if you count him as a starter.
Yep.
That's the problem with the offense right now.
All right. Jim Schwartz talked to the media today, and he addressed what's been missing from the Browns' defense the last 2 weeks against the Broncos and the Rams.
We've been 2 weeks now without a defensive line sack, and for us, that's not us. We're not built that way. We're built. We put a lot of resources up front. We have a lot of good players up front. We have a lot of talent up front. And we're at our best when we can generate pressure with 4-man pass rush. And in that game, the only time we were really able to generate any pressure was some blitz stuff. So we got to get back to that. We got to get back to clocking the quarterbacks and to building everything off of our 4-man pass rush. And that's just not Miles. That's Z and Obo and Dalvin and everybody else. We play 8 guys up front. Everybody gets significant reps up front. So we just haven't had, one guy not have sacks for a couple of weeks. We've had 8 guys not have sacks for a couple of weeks. And that's, that's something that's definitely on our radar. And when we're at our best, we can blitz on our terms as opposed to having the blitz to get pressure. And we're built that way. I expect to get back to that.
And you can be sure, Quincy, that's what his unit on defense has been hearing all week.
Mm-hmm. I mean, to me, it's been pretty obvious. You just ain't winning your one-on-ones, right? Miles is getting double teamed. You're going to get opportunities to get one-on-ones. We're not winning them. And you just got to do a better job of winning those one-on-ones. Had the same exact speech. Had the same exact problem against Seattle. You went on 1-3 straight off the back of some good defensive performances. I have no reason to believe that they're just going to fall off a cliff right now because of that, right? Well, I know it's easy to get lost in sauce after 2 bad games. You can fall into negativity, but the season is week by week. You can feel great one week, feel awful the next week, feel great for 2 weeks, feel awful for the next 2 weeks, and then you're fine, right? We thought that the San Francisco 49ers were done for the season once they lost those 3 games. They're back to being the best team in the NFL, right? So that's just what it is. Got to come out, play better, win your one-on-ones. If they do that, they'll be a very good team. They'll be able to beat anybody. That's just who they are.
Who do you, in your mind, who needs to step up? Who do they need to step up and meet the challenge that's ahead of them?
Za'Darius is the one who's underperformed the most, right? 2.5 sacks at this point. We thought he'd be an 8 to 10 sack guy. He hasn't even been close to that number. He needs to, step up. And I think the biggest issue for Za'Darius isn't that he's not getting pressure. I think he is getting pressure at a pretty high level. The issue with him is he's missing a lot of tackles this year. I think his missed tackle percentage is like over 30 right now. And when you're missing tackles, but you're getting pressure, what you end up doing is creating lanes on the outside to scramble out of or to throw out of or to run out of. You end up creating more problems than it's worth if you're getting pressures and missing tackles. So he's got to just get a more solid grasp, make those tackles, turn those missed tackles into sacks, and then he'll be fine. But that's been the big problem with him.
Yeah, the other thing is that it's been uneven play with the linebackers the last couple of weeks as well. Russell Wilson kind of killed him against with his legs against the Broncos, and then there were plays where they got gashed in the run game again against the Rams.
Yeah, I think that has a little bit to do with it. But honestly, I think it's just one-on-ones. You just got to win on one-on-one. Like, you're getting the one-on-one looks you want as a defensive line. The linebackers, they can help out a little bit. And I think the JOK has had some moments where he's helped out. I don't think that the secondary, the linebacking room is why you lost against the Rams. I think it's strictly down to you just did not hurry Matt Stafford in any way. You didn't get pressure on him. You didn't make him hurry up at all. You just did not do a good job against him defensively from that defensive line. I think if that defensive line's clicking, if they're winning their one-on-one battles, everything starts to click in place and you're like, oh my goodness, everything's so good. The corners, all this stuff, all that's going to be good. But if the defensive line isn't winning those one-on-ones that they get because of Myles Garrett, then it's going to look like what it did, because when you run a lot of man coverage, nobody's going to be great if you let them hold the ball for 3.5 seconds.
All right, this from NFL Stats. Most sacks this season, tops in the league right now is Khalil Mack. T.J. Watt is second. Danielle Hunter and Josh Allen, not the quarterback, but the guy that's playing defensive end against the Browns for the Jaguars. And then Myles Garrett checks in at fifth. So Josh Allen, the guy that Browns have to find a way to block. You see, has a half sack more than Myles Garrett. So they got an elite pass rusher coming in that will make his way to whomever is quarterbacking for the Browns.
Yeah, Josh Allen is pretty good. I mean, it's going to be about getting rid of the ball quickly, not holding on to the ball an extraordinary amount of time. And the Browns have done that. Like, if you combine Joe Flacco and just DTR, they both haven't taken a ton of sacks since they've stepped in for Deshaun Watson when he went out for the year. So they've been doing a pretty good job of avoiding that kind of stuff. I don't really worry about that too much. But shout out to Khalil Mack, man. Who thought he had another 15 in him, right? Like that. I thought we all forgot. He has the most quiet 15-sack season of all time. Like, that tells you where the Chargers are at right now as an organization. That man got 15 sacks, and his name is Khalil Mack. We know who he is. Don't nobody care. Don't nobody care.
Because his coach keeps going for it on 4th and 2 from his own 23. That's why we're not hearing about it.
They have a guy with 15 sacks and one of the better quarterbacks in the NFL, and they have a worse record than the Cleveland Browns do right now. And at no point have looked like a better team than the Browns. That's nuts. That's nuts. Hey, look, if there's a coach to fire, I feel like that's what a coach that should be fired looks like, Cleveland. Like that right there, you got 15 sacks, and you got Justin Herbert, and you have not looked better than the Browns have. That's why you would fire.
Now, be careful. He's a local guy here. All right, Quincy Carrier and I are going to step aside, take a quick timeout. Other side of the break, we'll talk a little bit more about that Browns defense, plus some surprises of 2023. Sports for CLE. Be right back. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
We continue talking Browns with Quincy Carrier from Untitled Unfiltered Browns coverage. Denzel Ward talked about what the defense has to do to get back on track.
We don't have to do nothing out the ordinary, just be us. Like I said, we put a lot of great tape out there on film. We got the ability to be elite defense in this league, and we just got to play to who we are. Got to play fast, got to play with that swag out there, and play complimentary ball. So I think we'll get back to who we are and help our offense out, help special teams, and help this team win.
And Quincy, that's kind of got to be some of the message that they're hearing is don't try to do too much. You know, don't try to get out of your lane and make plays that you can't make.
Yeah, don't do what you did last year where everybody was trying to be Superman at the end of the season. Just got to do what you can do. You're the same defense you were 2 weeks ago when everybody thought you were the best defense in the NFL. Just had a couple of off games. You can be the same defense that you were after this one. Just got to show up, do your job, make some tackles, win your one-on-ones, and then I think you'll be fine. It's real simple. You got the talent to do it. You have enough guys healthy to do it. It's not like Myles Garrett's out or anything like that. You still are very capable of being the defense that you were the last 3 weeks ago. There's no reason you can't get back to that form, especially when you're healthy.
All right. I know you've addressed this on your show as well. Third quarter report card for the Browns. So they're wrapping that up, getting ready to go into that last little bit of the season. What did you think of the third quarter of this season?
Highs and lows, right? Like, you probably had some of the best wins of your season and the worst loss of your season in this stretch, right? You beat Baltimore on the road. It's an incredible win. You feel incredible about that. And you follow that up with the win against Pittsburgh. Won those 2 games back-to-back for the first time in a very long time. But then you drop 2 games back-to-back on a road trip to have people concerned about what the state of the defense is going forward. It's been a mixed bag, but I think overall defensively, you have to look at it positively. Like, you did play some good games against some really quality opponents, and things didn't go your way in one of them. But offensively, I think that you're starting to stop the bleeding. Again, when DTR and Joe Flacco are in there, you throw less interceptions, you take less sacks. I think that those guys probably good enough to be out there, and you don't have to resort to PJ Walker anymore once DTR clears protocol. Whoever starts, I don't really care at this point. I think it's better, both of them, than what the alternative has been. And it's nice to have a little safety blanket between one of them. But yeah, the report cards have been pretty mild this quarter, because again, some of the best stuff you've done, some of the worst stuff you've done. It's averaged itself out till we'll see.
Yeah, feast or famine again. All right, biggest surprises of 2023 for you?
The biggest surprise of 2023 to me is Dustin Hopkins, because during the preseason, we anticipated having a disaster at the kicker position. We were sure we were going to have a disaster. We were hoping that we can just get something that avoids a disaster. What we did not expect is that we would get one of the better kickers in the NFL, which is what Dustin Hopkins has been for the Cleveland Browns. So that huge surprise, given where you started. Because again, we started at might have the worst kicker in the NFL, might have the worst kicking situation in the NFL. Now we're sitting here like, hey man, he might be better than some of the best kickers in the league.
All right, let's go biggest disappointments. What has been the biggest disappointment of 2023?
Injuries. It's got to be injuries, right? Like, there's no other way that you could look at this and not say that the most disappointing thing about this season for the Cleveland Browns has been the injuries, because the injuries have really just killed the whole vibe of the season, right? Nick Chubb goes down, your tackles go down, Deshaun Watson goes down. We talked about it. We've had 6 starters that we planned on playing all year play. Is what it is. It stinks. And I guess you could throw in the surprise category the fact that you've been able to maintain a playoff spot despite all these injuries. But yeah, we're going to look back at this season, and unless this team does something spectacular in the playoffs, or if they do something incredible there, then it changes how we view it. But we're going to look back at this season and go, damn, man, that was a season where just injuries killed us, but they still persevered through a lot of it.
The line injuries, do you think that has affected the run game at all? I would assume now Jedrick Wills is not an all-pro left tackle. I think he's better run blocker than DeJuan Jones is, and I think Jones will eventually get there. Don't get me wrong. I love DeJuan Jones. I think he'll eventually get there.
Yeah, I think it does have something to do with just the sloppiness that you've seen this run game go off of. I think it's the changes that you've had to deal with, to be honest, right? Like, if you're that offensive line, look at all the changes that you've had to deal with, and then ask yourself if that's an offensive line that's going to be able to execute at the same level as they did in 2020, where they didn't really have to change anything throughout the season. They had great injury health on the offensive line. They had great injury health at running back. They had great injury health at quarterback, right? But this year, you've asked them to endure 2 tackle changes. You've also asked them to endure 4 quarterback changes. So, like, the cadences are different, the way the plays are in, the nature of the play calls are going to be different, while also working in 3 to 4 different running backs. it's just too many moving parts to have a product that's going to be anything better than mediocre in the NFL. And I think that's really been the key of it. It's just been too many changes. You can even look at the receiving room, right, and say, hey, why are we dropping the football so much? We shouldn't be dropping. Well, they got to catch a different ball from a different quarterback every other week. We haven't gone more than 3 weeks without playing the same quarterback. That's going to have an effect on people's ability to catch the football where they don't know who's throwing it. Right? Like, that's just going to have its effect. I think all the injuries in total have been what has hurt this offense when it comes to consistency in the run game, when it comes to consistency catching the football, all of these things, all of these moving parts that we've had to deal with on the offense, like the bill comes due for that.
Quincy Carrier from Untitled Unfiltered Browns coverage and I are going to step aside, take a quick time out. Other side of the break, we'll get more specific with this Browns-Jaguars matchup Sunday at 1 over at Cleveland Browns Stadium. Sports4CLE will be right back. Stay with us. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program is dedicated to recognizing exceptional students, teachers, and schools throughout Ohio. Scan the QR code on screen to nominate students and teachers as Academic All-Stars and Teachers of the Month. They must be currently enrolled or teach in grades K through 12. Is your K through 12 school developing students' literacy skills to achieve success in reading? If so, you can nominate your school for the School of the Year. Students can win $100, teachers can win $500, and schools can win $2,500. Scan the QR code, fill out the forms, and nominate deserving students, teachers, and schools today. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program takes pride in honoring exceptional students, teachers, and schools across Ohio. Submit your nomination today. It's fun, fast, and free. We continue talking Browns with Quincy Carrier from Untitled Unfiltered Browns coverage. Doug Peterson, head coach of the Jacksonville Jaguars, who had Jim Schwartz as his defensive coordinator for 5 seasons in Philadelphia, one of those when they won the Super Bowl together, talked about what he sees with this Browns defense.
It really starts with Coach Schwartz, with Jim, honestly, the way he coaches these guys, you know, and what he says to them and how he says it to them, and you know, it's an aggressive style that goes all the way back to his days when he coordinated in Tennessee, you know, back in those days, and the type of defenses that he had, and it starts up front, starts with those front 4, and you know, he feels like if he can put pressure on your quarterback with 4, now he's got 7 guys back there with eyes on the quarterback that can make plays on the ball in the run and pass game, and that's what you see with this defense. And the strength is obviously, you know, this D-line. They're aggressive. Obviously, we know Myles Garrett, heck of a player, a lot of respect for him and the way he plays the game. But the other guys are you know, as talented as well. And that's where it starts. It starts up front, but it really starts with how, you know, Jim sort of messages with these guys.
Does it help that you know him, a lot of familiarity there?
I mean, just knowing him and how he coached and how he coached our defenses in Philly, you kind of know the structure a little bit. You know, he's changed some things, you know, schematically over his time, but you know, he's got a talented defense right now, and they're playing really good.
Quincy, that's something to keep in mind. He knows Doug Peterson. Doug Peterson knows him. So there'll be some chess movement going on between Browns defense, Jaguars offense.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, even though I think it's just going to come down to some of the basic stuff, right? Doug Peterson and Jim Schwartz, I think the beauty in their coaching styles is that they don't have this, well, they have this ability to not let the game get more complicated than it needs to, right? Doug Peterson, he's going to do what he feels like works well. He's going to run the ball with ETN, and he's going to try to play off of that with Trevor Lawrence. With Trevor Lawrence being hurt, probably going to run the ball a ton with ETN. That's going to probably be the strategy he goes with, because he's seen how the Browns aren't the greatest run defense team in the world the last few weeks. If you're Jim Schwartz, hey, look, everything that you know that Doug Peterson does, obviously you want to be prepared for that. But for the most part, what you want to be prepared for is winning them one-on-ones that you get outside of Miles Garrett, right? Like, you just want to win, get pressure, win on the line of scrimmage, reset it, because if you do that, you'll get tackles for losses, you'll force them into bad situations, and then you'll get those 3-and-outs that you used to.
All right, so I know how this is going to – I think I know how you're going to respond to this. Browns will beat the Jaguars if –
the defensive line shows up. That's really it, right? Defensive line plays well, you have a chance to win this game. But the defensive line does not play well, you don't. That's going to be the battle of this game. As long as nobody else is a disaster on the offensive side of the ball, like, I don't anticipate Joe Flacco, DTR, whoever's in there, to be a disaster. They'll be all right. If you don't get a disaster game from the quarterback position, it's going to come down to the defensive line. And the defensive line is going to win you this game. It's going to lose you this game. It's the heart of this team. It's everything that this team is around. The team wins games this year based on defensive line performances, right? When we've come back here and talked about how great the defensive line is and how great they played, it's not usually in a loss. Almost every win. No, actually, every win, we've talked about that, right? Oh, the defensive line had a great performance and all this stuff. That's what it takes. Defensive line plays well. This team plays well. That's the heart of this team. I know we're not used to that being the defense, but that's what it is. The defense dictates whether the Browns can win the game. There hasn't been a single game where the Browns won in spite of their defensive line this year. Ain't been one, right?
All right, let me throw this out at you. Cincinnati with Jake Browning, backup quarterback, had 491 yards of offense Monday night against the Jaguars. What areas can the Browns' offense exploit on Jacksonville, do you think?
Yeah, there's like some intermediate stuff that you could take care of against Jacksonville. They don't have the most responsive corners in the world. Maybe if this was Cooper, you could take some deep shots. I don't know if you do that, but with Marquise Goodwin coming back, maybe you do take some deep shots. But it's going to be a rainy, windy game. It's going to be kind of a messy one to play in. I wouldn't expect to throw for 491 yards of total offense, right? Or have Joe Flacco be over 300. Just try to move the ball, time of possession, get those short 5-yard throws. David Njoku on those stick routes where he's able to get yards at the catch. That's going to be really where I think the bread and butter is going to be for this offense.
The other thing is the Bengals were able to move them off the line of scrimmage up front. Interior defensive line. Anybody not named Josh Allen on that defensive line kind of got moved back by the Bengals offensive line. And the Browns' interior offensive line, it's better than the Bengals.
Yeah, they might be able to run the ball. This might be a big Kareem Hunt day where you just ask somebody to go north-south or ask Jerome Ford to go north-south. That might be a big point into it, too.
All right, Joe Flacco, we've talked about him. Sunday is supposed to be rainy, windy, and in the 40s in short bad weather. Flacco talked about playing games like that.
I think when you play in this division, which I have most of my career, you just have to get used to the fact that that's going to be the case. Both teams have to deal with it, and I don't think anybody, I don't care how long and how much you tell yourself that you love playing in this kind of stuff and try to convince yourself that you can do it. I don't think anybody loves it, but you get used to doing it, and you have your ways. I mean, I remember back in the day, coaches made you wear the long studs, and fields have gotten better over the last 15 years, but that's still a factor. You can see out in the practice field, like you want to be able to have guys. I would think more so than the ball and all that, it's footing, and it's getting guys' feet in the ground so that they can confidently run routes and put their feet in the ground.
And that will be a key, without question, Sunday.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this footing, being able to get you don't want a lot of drop passes because that can turn into interceptions as well. It's just about playing in that weather, running the ball well, being able to be consistent on that offensive line when it comes to the run front. This Browns run game has been so streaky. Either they play a good game or they don't. There seems to be no in between. And it's funny because Jerome Ford either breaks a 60-yard run or he doesn't. There seems to be no in between with this run game. So we'll see what they give you. You played in some cold weather against Denver a couple weeks ago, so you should be pretty used to it at this point. But yeah, it's going to be something to look out for. Jacksonville's also coming up from a warm weather place to play in the cold. I think it's going to be kind of a neutral factor in the game.
Quincy, Carrier, Untitled, Unfiltered Browns coverage as always. Great stuff. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Quincy.
Thank you for having me on, man.
All right, Quincy Carrier, make sure to check him out. Always really good Brown stuff. Untitled, Unfiltered Browns coverage. We're going to step aside, take a quick time out. We continue talking Browns. Trevor Sikkema from Pro Football Focus. Straight ahead. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
Holiday gold! The $20 scratch off?
It has 100 times multiplier. I could win $1 million.
Psych! I got merry and bright.
No fair.
It has a 200 times multiplier. I could win $2 million.
Game on the back.
Game on the back. Game on the back! Game on the back! Game on the back! Game on the back! Game.
I am powerful beyond my wildest imagination.
I will define my future.
I will keep challenging myself to improve.
Because I am a future leader of this great nation.
I will be responsible for raising a beautiful family.
And educating not only my generation, but many more to come.
I will make a difference in my community.
And I will stand up for what I believe in.
I will not settle for simply chasing my dreams, I will achieve them.
Because I was given a chance.
An opportunity.
A home.
At Family, Career, and Community Leaders of America.
The ultimate leadership experience.
FCCLA has been one of the greatest experiences of my life.
It's made me who I am today.
Join us. We'll build a new future together.
We continue talking Browns on Sports for CLE. Denzel Ward back on the practice field, trending towards being able to play for the Browns first time in a couple weeks. Jim Schwartz, Browns defensive coordinator, talked about dealing with the absence of Ward in this defense.
It does change some of your positions, like Greg Newsome went from playing the slot to outside, and then we were replacing the slot, and then the next week he went back to the slot, and then the other guys were outside. So continuity-wise, there is a little bit of that, but he's just a really good player and was playing at a really, really high level. And, you know, anytime you take a player like that away from you or away from your group, there's going to be some adjustments and things like that. We don't have any excuses. Our standard is the same regardless of who's playing, but excuses and reasons are different things, right? And Denzel means an awful lot to us. If we're able to get him back this week, I'm sure that'll give us a boost. If he's not, then we're going to have to figure out other ways to compensate and to be able to play, because the other teams also know when Denzel's out there.
Now let's welcome in Trevor Sikkema from Pro Football Focus, co-host of the NFL Stock Exchange podcast. Trevor, the man-to-man coverage in Denzel, that it kind of fits with what they want to do relative to getting pressure on the quarterback from the defensive line.
Yeah, no, 100%. And Jim's obviously right. He doesn't need me to tell him this, but Denzel is one of the best corners in the NFL. He's one of the most talented players that are at that position. And the reason why you could say that so confidently is because asking a corner to play man-on-man against receivers throughout an entire game is a very difficult task. There's only a certain amount of corners in this league who can do that against NFL caliber athletes at wide receiver. Ward's one of them. And when you have those types of players who, whether it's one guy who can go shut down their best wide receiver or whether it's just scheme across the board, you get a lot of man coverage corners. The more of those guys that you have, the more aggressive that you can get in your front. I think that we have seen that throughout certainly the early parts of this season. It's when you marry that aggressive coverage with the aggressiveness that you have in the front seven that you get the results that Cleveland's been able to have as one of the best defenses in the NFL this season. So there's no doubt about it that Denzel is just as paramount to getting after the quarterback or generating pressure as some of those guys are up front, who are the ones who are getting the sacks in the backfield.
So this from Pro Football Focus as well. Browns defense has allowed points on just 39 of 154 drives this season, 25.3. Ranks number 1 in the NFL still. And again, that kind of skewed a little bit the last couple of weeks because fourth quarters, they haven't gotten it done. Against the Rams, that got away from. Same thing in late in the game against the Broncos.
And it's just a silly stat. It really is. Like, to be that efficient on defense and to hold teams to that low of point totals is it's pretty insane. But the reason why you're able to have that much success is because everybody's working cohesively. And throughout an NFL season, you mentioned whether it's kind of fatigue. Obviously, we're into the month of December now. It's kind of crunch time. We're getting towards the end of the regular season. Some injuries that you have from guys in and out of the lineup. And you got to remember this too. Even the guys that are in the lineup, they're probably playing banged up. So what made Cleveland so effective and so dominant early on in the season is that team speed everywhere. I mean, they had speed in the secondary, speed at the linebacker level, speed up front. Like, it was just overwhelming for teams very clearly. And there's still a fantastic defense in that regard. But when you start getting banged up a little bit, when you get into the ending part of the season, maybe some of that speed, maybe guys are playing it 70, 80%. Sure, they're out there on the field, but maybe it's not exactly what it was at the beginning of the year. So it's nothing that I don't think is like a kiss of death, nothing that they can't overcome. It's something that just every single team has to deal with. And this time of the year are all about those kinds of adjustments, because what really matters most is you want to be hitting your stride with however healthy you are once you get into that postseason or the last couple of weeks of the regular season. So that's what these next couple of weeks are going to be all about, because it's huge. You got to be able to finish games. You got to be able to continue to play at a high level on defense, especially knowing how much uncertainty that you have in the quarterback position on the other side of the ball.
And the good news is Browns have a lot of home games. They've played significantly better, especially on defense at home. Highest graded players on the Browns defense this season. Not a surprise at number 1, Myles Garrett, 92.4. Second one is Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, 81.1. Maurice Hurst, 80.3. Zadarius Smith. Grant Delpit, Shelby Harris. So a lot of those veteran tackles that they brought in are among their highest ranked defenders for the season. Who's impressed you out of the group?
Honestly, I'd go to Owusu-Koramoah. Like, this is somebody who, as a draft guy, I really liked him coming out of Notre Dame, but it wasn't just this plug-and-play type of a linebacker, right? He's built very differently. He's a little bit smaller in size, but he gives you that extra speed. So I remember there was debate, okay, is he going to be able to play at the linebacker level? Is he more of a box safety, but he's more playing that safety position? Is he going to be this slot defender? Because at Notre Dame, they would use him as this apex slot defender right outside of the tackle box and right outside of the front seven. And he would just kind of be this player where if they knew exactly where they were going to run the ball, he was going to be able to cut it off, and he was very effective doing that. Now he is rounding himself out to be just a really damn athletic linebacker for the NFL level, and he's making a big difference. To gain, and I want people to know this, there are some positions in which PFF grades are harder to score well than others. Linebackers, very difficult. You're sitting in the middle of that defense. You got to be in your run fits. You got to be able to make tackles. You got to be reliable in that area. You got to be able to cover all sorts of different players, whether it's in zone, whether it's in man, no matter what. So the linebacker's job in the centerpiece of that defense, for you to grade in the 80s, really, really impressive given everything that they have to do. So for Koramoah to get that kind of a grade, that to me has been the most impressive part of this season.
Yeah, the other thing is he shows up in the run game a lot. Is that because he's finally free to run sideline to sideline like you saw him do in college?
Well, I just think it's kind of a matter of experience, right? I mean, I think that's you're not getting fooled with any sort of pre-snap motion. You're able to recognize things a little bit more. Pulling guards, you can read those things a little bit more. And I'm sure just added strength as well. You're a couple of years into this league at this point, so he probably went in a little undersized. I mean, leaning on his speed more than his strength, and now he's probably evening things out a little bit. So he feels like it's just a maturation of his game to where you're seeing a lot of the really good things that we saw at Notre Dame, but you're also seeing him kind of come into his own, be an even better linebacker in those run defense areas, true run defense areas in between the tackles than what we even saw from him in college. So he's just playing some really good ball.
Let's switch sides of the ball. Offense. So Amari Cooper in concussion protocol. Not sure if he'll be able to go. He's been the Browns' most consistent wide receiver. After that, it's been really uneven. What have you thought about the Browns' pass catchers? We'll include tight ends, but wide receivers, tight ends.
It's just not as impactful as it needs to be outside of Cooper. I mean, you mentioned, I know that's an answer that everybody kind of has been talking about for a while in Cleveland, but that's why we were so excited about Cedric Tillman in Cleveland, because we felt like there was a pretty easy path to playing time, and there wasn't really that type of receiver on the roster. Cooper can do a lot of different things. He can be on the line of scrimmage, an X type of a receiver, but he also works really well as an off the line of scrimmage, as a flanker, a guy that you can move in motion, a guy that you can play from the slot as well as the outside. So you want to have the flexibility to move Amari Cooper wherever you possibly can, because he's that good of a receiver. But you need to anchor it with a guy who you can play on the line of scrimmage at any time, because of the rules of how many guys you got to have on the line of scrimmage. And obviously you don't want to put somebody on there who can't handle press coverage, who can't handle that kind of bump and run coverage or anything like that. So to me, Cedric Tillman is somebody who he's been getting a decent amount of playing time. I think, the PFF grade is a little bit lower. He's somebody who's still coming into his own, but he's somebody who, when I go into, okay, what could this Cleveland roster be next year? I factor in him taking a pretty decent jump and thinking, okay, now you got these two guys, and I expect them to probably draft somebody as well who can come into this receiver room, because it has not been impactful enough beyond Amari Cooper.
All right. Along those lines, I know you've done a mock draft for Pro Football Focus as well. Take us through who makes sense there and what you like about him and what he does. It's Ladd McConkey from Georgia.
Yeah, obviously, Cleveland's not picking until the second round. So there's a lot of really great receivers in this draft, but thankfully for them, it's also a very deep draft. Now, McConkey is a smaller player. He's around 5'11", 6 feet tall, 185, 190 pounds. And you look at him, you go, okay, this is just strictly a slot receiver. But he's really more than that. I mean, he's a fantastic slot receiver because of the great body control that he has, the diverse route tree that he can use, how he manipulates those two-way go options when he's going up against defenders that give him a lot of space. I mean, he's been fantastic in that regard. But there are also times, and there were some Alabama corners who were quoted before this week who were talking about the Georgia receivers, and they were talking about McConkey, and they were like, hey, truly, you look at this guy and you go, okay, he's not going to burn me deep. And then all of a sudden he's even with you, and then he's getting by you. You go, wait a second, hold on here. So he is somebody who I think is more of what they wanted Elijah Moore to be. And not to say like it's totally over for Elijah Moore, but to me, that's the type of player that Ladd McConkey is that they still need. They need that consistent guy who is a slot receiver for you, but can also be a consistent vertical threat. So that's why I think he makes a ton of sense for them in the second round.
Trevor Sikkema from Pro Football Focus and I can step aside, take one more time out. Other side of the break, we'll dial it in a little bit more about this Browns-Jaguars matchup. Sports4CLE will be right back. Stay with us.
Holiday gold! The $20 scratch-off?
It has 100 times multiplier. I could win $1 million.
Psych! I got merry and bright.
No fair.
It has a 200 times multiplier. I could win $2 million.
Game on the back.
Game on the back.
Game on the back!
Game on the back! Game on the back! Game on the back! Game.
We continue talking Browns with Trevor Sikkema, Pro Football Focus, co-host of the NFL Stock Exchange podcast. Browns getting ready to host Jacksonville Jaguars Sunday at Cleveland Browns Stadium. Trevor Lawrence was injured in the Monday night game, but Trevor Lawrence back out on the practice field for Jacksonville. You see, has the knee brace on one leg, has the sleeve on the other, so mobility not great, but Trevor, I was watching that game and I thought it was much worse than a high ankle sprain. So the fact that that Trevor Lawrence is back out on the practice field and trending towards potentially being able to play, it's pretty impressive.
I mean, I will almost believe it when I see it at this point. Like I can't believe that he's out and practicing. So he looks like he's moving around great, which is awesome. You know, he's one of the best players that we have in this sport. So the game is always better when those guys are healthy. I know Cleveland Browns fans maybe won't think that this week, but look, I think that Lawrence is having a fantastic year. He really is. And shoot, if he can go out there, I think that they're gonna play him. Now, obviously, the coach has a obligation to sometimes protect the player from himself, but Trevor Lawrence is a tough dude. I know some people might look at the long blonde hair and they might not think that that's the case, but he hasn't missed a game in his NFL career yet, and I think that's because of the toughness that he has. And so I will still be shocked if he plays, but with only so many of these regular season games left, and with this team still in the hunt, very close hunt for not just the #1 overall seed, but shoot, you drop one game, you might go from #1 all the way to #4. They know how important these things are. Lawrence knows how important these things are. So, hey, we might see him this weekend.
Yeah, it's expected to be a wet weather and rainy, and that could affect it as well. When you look at Jacksonville, who were some of the guys offensively that jump out?
So Etienne's the big one, obviously. I think that they're going to, whether Lawrence is there or not, they run a lot of their explosive plays through him and through the run game. You know, he's somebody who he can beat you between the tackles. He's got the speed to get the sideline. He can give you those explosive plays. He's one of the best in the NFL at it. And then he can be used very well as a receiver too. So I think they'll focus their offense through him, especially with Christian Kirk out now. And that was kind of a strange situation too. You know, he catches his first pass in that Monday night game and he's kind of holding his groin. And all of a sudden now he's got to have core surgery and he's going to be out for probably 2 months now at this point. So with him now out of the lineup, of course, Calvin Ridley is their go-to wide receiver. But outside of him, Parker Washington is a guy that a lot of people got to know for the first time this past Monday night during Monday Night Football, and he's somebody who I liked a lot when he was coming out of the draft a couple years ago. So he's somebody who, okay, maybe not the most athletic guy in the world, but really nice hands catcher, reliable guy when the ball is coming his way, and he's just a determined football player when it comes to those yards after catch. So you saw them be willing to get the ball in his hands a little bit, and I think that he is going to continue to be a part of that offense with Kirk now out.
Yeah, the other guy that comes to mind is the tight end, and he's kind of a hybrid almost in Evan Engram. He, finally found the end zone for the first time, but he has been a weapon for them offensively.
Yeah, no, there's no doubt about it. Now his season, it's been a little up and down, right? It's a little hot and cold, and so you're not sure whether you're getting a big impactful Evan Engram game or not. But there's no doubt about it, when they get him involved, much tougher team to defend. You've got to defend a lot more blades of grass, if you will, when he is somebody who's a consistent threat. And so they will certainly try to get him involved in the offense as early as they can.
So Josh Allen, one of the top sack leaders, he kind of jumps off the page defensively. What are some areas, you looked at what the Bengals were able to do, that interior defensive line, have they struggled all year? Cincinnati was winning the battle in the middle. The guards and centers were kind of recreating the line of scrimmage, if you will.
Yeah, and I think that that's an issue for both lines for the Jags. It's that interior part, the interior defensive line for them, and that defensive side of the football. You mentioned it. The Bengals were able to control that pretty well. They weren't getting a lot of pressure up front. It was basically Josh Allen getting pressure, or pressure wasn't happening unless they were bringing some extra guys on the blitz. So that's been an issue for the Jags, I would say, over the last couple of weeks, and it's something that's kind of manifesting into a off-season need for them that people are going to start to talk about. But then on the flip side too, the offensive trenches, and specifically the interior. So if you just look at the overall offensive line for Jacksonville, they're 20th in overall PFF grade. But if you just take the guards in the center, they're 28th in the league in total PFF grade. So that is an area where Cleveland really could. You mentioned some of those veteran interior defenders that they've got. Like, that's an area where they can really generate some pressure, because that's been a weak spot along the offensive line. So especially if Trevor Lawrence isn't as mobile as he usually is, that could be an area that really Cleveland plays to their advantage with how quickly they can get pressure on the inside.
Is that kind of the thing that you think is the biggest matchup there? What's the biggest matchup that the Browns need to win in order to come away with a much-needed win in this game?
Yeah, again, that would be what I would echo is you got to be able to run the ball in between the tackles, and I think they'll have the ability to do that. You can make the game as slow as you want to, and certainly when you're playing a team like Jacksonville, you want to be able to control the ball as much as possible, certainly if Lawrence is playing. But then that big key matchup for me personally would have been what the Browns can do on the interior and the interior pressure that they can bring, some A-gap blitzes, things like that. Usu Koromoa could be a guy who's used very advantageously with that as well because he can get a lot of pressure up the middle. It's just been a struggle for Jacksonville. And Jacksonville might not even have Walker Little, who missed the second day of practice today. And so if you got to rotate maybe Ezra Cleveland out to left tackle, that means another new guy in the interior. So that could mean a big Myles Garrett game if they're going to line him up against Cleveland, who might be on the, or whoever's going to play left tackle for him. So they have the opportunity to dominate that side of the line of scrimmage and continue to get pressure. And that's going to be Cleveland's plan to winning this one.
Trevor Sikkema, Pro Football Focus, as always. Appreciate the time, the insight so much. Thanks very much, Trevor.
Of course, guys, anytime.
Trevor Sikkema, make sure you check him out. Pro Football Focus, co-host of the NFL Stock Exchange podcast. Also some really good stuff relative to the NFL draft. Always doing that work. That's going to do it for this edition of Sports for CLE. We will see you back here tomorrow at 4 o'clock. Have a great night, everybody. See you tomorrow at 4 on Sports for CLE.